Hey team, welcome back to another incredible episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I'm excited. I'm joined by my friend Amanda De Jong. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. A little bit of a mouthful, but I'm excited to have her on here and excited to dive into that. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's great to be with you and see you again.
Yes. All right. You get the same opening question everybody does. What does it mean to you to be intentional?
Well, I had the great opportunity to join the ASFMRA. We'll use that because it's easier
Yeah.
here just about 3.5 months ago. And so I was asking myself this very question: how am I going to enter this new role and this new job in an intentional way? And so for me, it has really been about active listening, being
Mm,
in the place, in the time, in the moment, focused on what our council was telling me. That's essentially my board of directors, my staff, my new staff was telling me, and our larger membership and the stakeholders that we serve. People, my experience is people want to be heard. And when there's a new leader coming in, there's a lot of ideas, right? There's a lot of
mm,
feedback, and they have a new opportunity to give it to this new person. And so, for me, whether it's when I'm first starting a new role or really anytime, it's at home, right? It's in my community, it's in the civic organizations I belong to. It's about actively listening to what people are telling you because there's usually some truth to it.
absolutely. I really love that. I think you're the first person who's ever led with that. And I really, really like it. And you're right, because um, how long was your predecessor in the role as CEO?
20 years.
Right. And I think that's pretty common, especially in associations, probably in cooperatives too, right? Where you have a long time, 20, 30, some even 40-year veteran who's been in that seat for a long time. Now the new generation is coming in and taking over, right? And it's kind of like, here's an opportunity for a fresh start. So yeah, so that's
Yeah,
yeah, super interesting.
yeah, and it doesn't have to be that, that everything doesn't have to be new, right? Not everything needs changed. There's a way to embrace your history, your culture, your successes. I mean, the American Society, we're coming up on 100 years. We'll be 100
Mhm.
in 2029.
Wow.
And um, there's a reason that this organization has not only existed but thrived for that long. Um, it also doesn't mean that we don't need to change, right? And adapt and embrace our future, meet our members where they are, meet our new members, our newest members where they are. And, as I said, people want to be heard. What I found, you don't necessarily have to have an answer for everything. It's okay to say, I hear you. I'm listening to you. I'm taking your feedback. I'm taking your input. I might not have a solution today. I might have to have more conversations with more stakeholders before I do have that answer. But what I found is that, you know, if you lead that way, if you're intentional with your time and people's time, because there's literally no more valuable resource than our time. Nothing. I can't think of anything that's more valuable to me than time. I'm probably halfway. I hope I'm halfway through my life. I hope I live another, 45 years or so. Um, that time, the time I have with my family, the time that I give to my work, the time that I spend in my community and my civic involvement, um, that's very precious to me, right? Because you're taking time from one thing in place of another thing.
Yep.
And so if I'm going to take your time, I'm going to listen to you, right? And I hope, and I hope that conversation obviously goes two ways. I hope that people can be present in that listening and they're not just thinking about the next thing they're saying. Or what I often find is, in today's culture or Zoom world, you can sort of tell if people are doing other things during the meeting, right? Are you in
Right.
this meeting
Yep.
or are you getting ready for the next meeting? Right? Be in place. And if you're not in place, then wrap the meeting up, right? Especially if you're leading, if it's your meeting, right? Shut her down. Like if people aren't engaged or we're not getting where we need to get, then let's come back and revisit this topic at a different time. But again, don't waste people's time. It's the most precious thing we all have.
I could not agree more. And then just especially in today's world where there's so much fast communication, we're texting, we're emailing, we're slacking and all the things and Zooming and Teams meetings, especially since 2020, we seem to have lost a lot of that human connection. And so just anything we can do to make people feel heard, I think is really, really valuable. So, Amanda, just give us a little bit of an understanding, if you would, of, what is the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers? I see a lot in the title here. I didn't know it was a 100-year-old organization. So just give us the history and what is it now?
Yeah, well, we pride ourselves on being the premier organization, really for rural property land experts. So these could be farm managers, consultants, and certainly rural appraisers. We have over 2,000 members. They reside and work in all 50 states. And we've been focused on providing for those members the highest levels. Well, let me back up. They're focused on providing the highest levels of service to their customers and clients.
Yep.
And our pillars are to help support them in doing that. So really built on the training and higher education needs that they have to help them specialize in those fields and serve their clients and customers. And then the other thing we really provide beyond that education, that's real formal education, right? That's accreditation education. It's qualifying education on the appraisal side for people to get their licenses to be appraisers. But we also create what I sort of call this network effect. And you're talking about that in-person connection. It's really just about human connection, whether it's in person or not. We've got unmatched expertise in rural property, hands down. And our members rely on one another. Not only for that formal education, because we teach, our instructors are our practitioners, but also for that more informal education, things that come through mentorship, things that come through business referrals. I hear about that all the time within our members. And then just general knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer about experiences that our managers and consultants have and our appraisers have, and in ways that they can help others in their profession. It's a super interesting profession that, or professions that I've got to witness the last few months. They lift each other up. They help each other
Right.
for the betterment, really, of all rural clients. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting to me because we just typically think about some of the other ag organizations, maybe that support retailers or that support farmers and, other special interest groups
Sure.
and checkoffs. And we've had some of those folks on the show recently. We've been having a lot of associations on here because I think it's interesting. You guys have so much influence over the different aspects of the industry. Well, we obviously we understand and we know about land transactions and other things like, that you guys are touching all the time. But we just, we don't think about the behind the scenes, like how do you get to be an appraiser? What are some of
Yeah.
the challenges that these
Yeah. I
farm
mean,
managers face?
it turns out,
Yeah,
turns out it's a lot of work to become an appraiser. We won't go into that here, but
right,
it requires a lot of specialized education beyond just going to college and getting a job, right?
right.
But I will tell you that when you think about, you talked about like interviewing farmers and the trade groups and stuff. Listen, like there is a lot happening in land transition in the United States right now,
Big
right?
time.
And I think about our professions as those sort of silent warriors that are helping every one of those transactions be as smooth as they possibly can. And these are complex, right? It's one thing when a family decides, or a farmer retires and decides they're going to put the farm up for auction, right? But there's also lots of different scenarios, right? With non-farm heirs, with more institutional type investors coming in and buying farmland because of it being an asset class that's protected from Wall Street, right? And
Yep.
so there is a lot of change coming in land transition and land ownership really as we speak, and is going to continue over the next probably 10 to 20 years. And people who live, people who own the land and people who farm the land or people who hunt the land, depending on what kind of property it is, they want to ensure that that land is there and accessible for them, right? And that it's in good shape and that it's been managed appropriately and that it's been valued correctly, right? And so, they might not be the hero of the story. I think everyone always, thinks about the farmer as the hero, but they certainly are such a critical piece to ensuring that that land is preserved for generations.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever taken a second to sit back and think about it that way, but it's absolutely true. And you think about how much emotion, right, is tied up in this land, because it's where you come from. Like
Mm-hmm.
we sold the little farm that I grew up on in Minnesota about 5 years ago, but you know what? I still got a jar of soil. And it sits in my bedstand, and it's there. And I can, if I miss home, I can open it up and smell it, from 1,500 miles away now in North Carolina. And it still means something when I go back home to visit my folks. Like I drive by and, kind of look at, longingly at the place that I grew up on. And it still really means something. And now as I think about acquiring my own place and the legacy that my wife and I intend to leave to our kids, it's really important that we
Mm-hmm.
acquire that the right way. So this is a really important aspect. Um, Maybe an unfair question, and feel free to divert to another interview down the road, maybe. But is there anything that you guys are advertising or that you promote in ways that buyers should be, or those of us that look to acquire or grow, should be doing to kind of make sure that we're protecting these longer term legacies?
Oh, that's a great question. It's probably in some ways a better question for some of our members, right? Like
Yeah.
our farm management and appraisal companies. But I will tell you that, what I think about is you mentioned the personal, like it's personal and it's business, and both can be true, right?
Mm,
So, I grew up on a family farm. My husband is a full-time farmer. We live on the farm. I'm very invested in this, right? This property that we live on, the farms that we farm, and building that legacy for our children. But it's also a business, and it's a business that has to be successful every year to continue to be in business, right? And whether, that my personal legacy, which is my two sons, decide that this is the profession or a profession they want to be part of,
right.
so be it. That's their choice to make. That's not my choice to make. um, it can be personal. We can wish that for them, but we can also wish or be proud of them no matter what they ultimately choose to do with their lives. This was my husband and my's choice, right?
Yeah.
And that was the life that we wanted to have for them. And it's okay if it's different. So when I think about what our members are doing every day, right? They're involved. They're sometimes in the middle of really complex situations, right? Families that are breaking up, right?
Mm, yeah.
Families that have dealt with the death in the family and the farm is not going to be the same, right? They're acting as, with lots of folks, right? Accountants might be involved and lawyers might be involved, but, they're playing a piece in the role of helping advise landowners, in particular, how to move forward in sometimes the best of times and sometimes the worst of times, right? And all of those things can be true. It can be personal and hurt, and it can also be, trying to make the best financial decision for the future for whatever your personal circumstances are. So they play
Yeah.
a really important role, and it's okay that it's a silent one sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I think, we all just need to perhaps give ourselves a little bit more permission to use the professionals that know what they're doing rather than try to be like, hey, this is how dad did it and this is how grandpa did it, or it shouldn't be this difficult, or I shouldn't have to spend this kind of money to do some of these things. And I think, man, like good, wise counsel is priceless. So I would encourage people to look at that. And then I'm going to pivot here in a second, Amanda, but I want to say this before I do. I think this is in part why the conversation about intentional leadership is so stinking important. And as I often say on the show, all the times in life I've become the most resentful of my situation, or because of the times in life I've been the least intentional. right? So maybe per your definition, maybe it's listening to wise counsel that helps me along, right? Maybe it's just really slowing down. And I'm so guilty of just moving fast, like a bull in a china shop, running into situations, and then later on having to go clean up the mess that I made. So it's like, to be intentional means to slow down and be really deliberate. It's one of our 3 Ds actually of our definition of intention, is to
Mm-hmm.
be like, intentional leadership is deliberate, which means you slow down and deliberate, right? Really, really important.
It's the truth. And it's the truth, Mark. And I sort of use that approach in all aspects of my life, right? So we're talking here about, this very personal thing, which is like the family farm transition, just as an
Yeah.
example. But, um, you know, eh, some of the best leaders I've worked with throughout my career, and those are people, not just bosses, those are people who've worked for me, people, that have been my peers, do that, right? They actually understand that they don't have to know everything, right? It's back to that. You don't have to have an answer for everything, right? You can
Right.
surround yourself with people, with mentors, with, I call it like, my board of directors that's at my kitchen table, so to speak, right? What do you think? How should we handle this situation, right? The best leaders don't have the answer for everything, but they do listen to the people with the best answers, right? And so that can play out really anywhere in our lives.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Okay. I want to talk about a few of these other things, because, you've had a really cool career, I think. I mean, you spent some time with Iowa Corn, right? If I remember right. And you spent some time in the cooperative world,
Correct.
spent some time with Pivot.
Correct.
And so you've had this like association angle, and you've had the private, the private industry, private equity angle. And now you're coming in, and you've got the reins of an organization, that's historic, and you get to come in and now be the new generation leading it. Um, what from let's just take this from a culture creation, culture building, culture maintaining standpoint. What's really important to you right now as you have 3 months at the helm of a new organization?
Yeah, I think it's partially sort of embracing where you've come from,
Mm-hmm.
certainly, right? Celebrating and reflecting on where you've come from. And then thinking about, as we build the strategy of the future, um, where do we need to go, right? Where do we need to be to meet our members 20 years from now, right? And what does that mean from building that intentional culture? Well, culturally, these professions are also changing, right? They might not think so, but I've been interviewing, like you do this podcast and interview people. I've probably interviewed 60 or 70 people so far in the first 30 months, where I have intentionally sat down with folks for 45 minutes to an hour and asked them pretty much the same kinds of questions, right? Tell me about. Um, and what I'm hearing is that we have culture change going on within our professions, right? And some of that is being driven by technology. Some of that is being driven by the demands of society that exist differently. The way we learn today is not the same way that our members learned 40 years ago, right? But those members who
Yeah.
learned 40 years ago are still in, they're still working, they're still in our professions and still need education, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so, you know, what I always say is, if you're going to, culture is not a thing, right? It's not a thing to be fixed. Culture is sort of a living, breathing being almost, that can be positive or negative. And you kind of got to care and feed for it. You really have to obviously lead by examples, have leaders in your organization, and that's at your board level, that's also in your staff level. Set the example of what that culture needs to be, what that culture needs to look like for that organization to be successful. And then, always about making sure the negative is out, right?
Yeah.
Finding
Yeah.
leaders who focus on the positive, who understand that, listen, mistakes can happen, right? We can fail. We can try something new. It doesn't go the way we think. That's okay if we do something about it, right? What do we do with what we learned? Or are we just going to come back in every week and Monday morning quarterback that situation? Because if we keep doing that, we're not going to move
Yeah.
forward. And
Yeah.
so, from my perspective, that's sort of what I've been trying to do right now. I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback anything, right? I'm going to try to assess the organization where it's at today and think about how we build strategies for the membership of the future while maintaining the membership we have today and ensuring they're staying, that they feel served.
So good. You guys should rewind about 3 minutes and re-listen to that portion right there, because it's a little masterclass right there in how to lead a team intentionally. And I love the part about just sitting down and actually interviewing people and finding out what's going on. What are the trends? What are the potential mountains that we're going to have to climb? And especially with the advent of technology, as we talked off the mic today, AI is impacting all of us in big ways and making us more efficient and changing the way we do things. So, it sounds like you're on top of it and taking an intentional look forward and setting your strategy intentionally, which I love. Amanda, I've always looked at you as one of the standout leaders in ag of our generation, and I think we're pretty close in age, and so we've kind of probably watched each other through social media over the years, over the last decade or decade and a half, probably decade and a half, and so which starts to we're that we're that far along now.
Yep.
What's been one of the biggest challenges, say, over the last 10 or 15 years that you've had to overcome?
I think a lot of it always comes down to just human interaction, right? It's probably why I focus on trying to listen as much as I do. And so, there hasn't been like one moment where I was like, wow, that was just the hardest thing I ever had to do. Or wow, like, how are we ever going to get through this? I would say, it's really been more about finding your, that sort of right kitchen cabinet. Like, who do you want to surround yourself with? Who do you want to, time is limited. Who do you want to spend your time with, right? Obviously, I want to spend time with my family, right? I have created that environment.
Yep.
But when we go to work every day, we spend a lot of our prime years working. And so being again, I love this, the word intentional, because it's about being intentional about who you surround yourself with, right?
Mm.
Do you want to work with people who are positive, who are forward thinkers, who are, driving towards, the goal line? Or do you want to spend your time working with people and surrounding yourself with folks who are kind of stuck? And I think everybody would say, oh, I want to be with the folks who are working towards the goal line. Well, guess what? A lot of us don't do that, right? We get sucked into the negative. It's easy to get sucked into the negative, right? It's actually harder to build, right? It's harder to create and to build and to inspire and to help your teams create and inspire, right? But that's the team that you want to be on. That's the team that I want to be on. And so, that's what I try to focus on. And that's what I'm trying to focus on now. And sometimes it's okay to say, like, hey, this isn't the right place for me. Right. Mark, I think you and I, have both been involved in situations where you say, you know what? This culture isn't right for me. Hey, the sense of negativity here does not fill my cup. And it's okay to say, I'm going to do something different, because only I can decide what's best for me. Only I am going to be looking out for what's in the best interest of my health, my family, my family's health. And sometimes it's okay to raise your hand and say, you know what, I'm going to go find a place where I thrive and where I can succeed.
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree. So good. Such a good answer too. So flip side of that question then is, what's been one of your biggest wins?
Man, for me, it's always been about the next generation. So I think you and I probably met back in Agriculture Future of America days. That's really where my inspiration for this kind of came from. But how can I help, especially for me personally in agriculture, right? How can I help more young people choose agriculture as a profession, right? Because I think it's the greatest calling. It fills my cup, and I know, and I hope it fills other people's cups. And frankly, I want to eat, right? I want to eat in the future, right? I want to drive my car in the future off, American made products. And so you know, helping mentor, helping those, back to high school age, but certainly college age folks find their path, find their footing in an industry that can frankly be intimidating at times, right? You come in, and especially for
Mhm.
people outside of agriculture who look in and say, well, I didn't grow up in it. How can I work in it? Right. And
Right.
I actually, have encouraged folks who are not in agriculture to consider us as a profession, like consider this as a way of life, because that diversity, that creativity, those different experiences actually, I think, help us in agriculture. They help us as farmers, because I get to wear that hat too. My husband and I farm. They help us be better, think differently. And so, yeah, that's kind of been, where my focus has been, or where think I've been able to help contribute. I've had a few mentors come into companies and work for me or work with me, or mentees, I should say. And hopefully that's given them a springboard to go out and crush it in this world.
I love it. So good. So good. I really do like it. And yeah, you brought up something interesting I'm thinking about a lot these days. And this is more of an opinion I'll share than a question. And feel free to respond. But yeah, as I think about our generation, as we were coming of age, say back in the mid '90s, like in high school, the recruiting message of the ag industry back then was feeding the world, right? Sign up for the ag army,
Mhm.
right? Feed the world, and whatever your job is. So you want to be an ag teacher, you want to be in you want to be involved in crop production, you want to be a farmer, you want to work for a Cargill or one of the other large ag entities that's out there. Like, feed the world, right? We just need
Mhm.
people because there was a
Mhm.
gap, right? And so that was the
Mhm.
recruiting message. And what I find about that, right, is it's to some extent it kind of comes from a place of scarcity, because that, up until the more recent decades, say the last 3 decades or so, feeding the world was really the challenge. There was, and today is, it's not, it'll always be a challenge. We're still going to have to feed people, but that's sort of like, I think
Right.
we've gotten to a point where that's table stakes. We do a pretty good job of that now, right? We have an
Mhm.
abundance. Our commodity prices are reflective today of the abundance that we're producing. So in a world where abundance is now becoming more the norm, I
Mhm.
think we have to retrain ourselves and we have to find a new North Star, right? So feeding the world, like, we're there, we're doing it, and we can always do a better job. We can be more efficient, we can be more sustainable, we can be better stewards of the land, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm seeking now is for someone or some entity or for us as an industry to step up and say, okay, what is the North Star today? What's the North Star for our kids' generation who are in high school and middle school, right, and in elementary school coming up? Like, what's
Mhm.
going to be the recruiting message that inspires them to want to join the team? So that's my opinion and my thought, and something I spent a lot of time thinking about. Those that listen to the show regularly have heard me say that undoubtedly on several episodes. But that's something that's on my mind today as we think about the legacy.
It's a great point, and I would have to agree with you. And just from a personal perspective, my husband and I don't get up, and he certainly doesn't get up every day and think about, I'm going to work. I'm going to go out and feed those cattle because I'm going to feed the world today, right?
Right.
For us, it's just more about stewarding God's natural resources. Like, we feel privileged to have the
Yeah.
opportunity to live and work on this farm, care for livestock, care for our water, care for our land, because we do want to preserve it, right? And we actually, and we care because of that legacy we were talking about earlier, right? Those kids, those future generations that I can't even imagine, right? And so that's what drives us. That's our personal North Star. But you're right. As an industry, it probably is something a little bit different than feeding the world. And I'm going to put that back on you, Mark. You need to help us solve that because you talk to a lot of folks. So
I do.
get
I
some
do.
ideas.
And I'm trying to start the conversation around it, right? Because I don't believe that I'm the one who will set the tone or set that. But I will
Hmm.
say this: I think it falls into the category of a bit of a retraining on how do we lead in agriculture from a place of true abundance,
Hmm.
right? and letting abundance be the
Right.
guide, where for every generation of humans until now, it has been scarcity driven, survival, right? Survival driven.
Mm,
My old tagline for the original version of the company was "Survival is dead. It's time to thrive," and so I think a lot about, well, what does living in a thriving world really look like, right? And
yeah.
so
Yeah.
that will that conversation is gonna evolve. I invite people to join me and challenge me on it if need be, but that's where I really think we're going to be moving into a true world of abundance. And I was challenging my kids and our family with this at Thanksgiving. I said, I mean, look around at what we have. We have a beautiful house, we have a beautiful table. Not everybody does, right? But most people in America today are not terribly concerned about what's for supper. If you ask most
That's
people
right.
what they're having for supper, they haven't actually. It's 1 o'clock Eastern time as we record this, and they haven't thought about it yet. It's whatever they want. And
Exactly.
so, we have a distribution problem more than we have a production problem at this point, and we've
Hmm.
got to we got to fix that. But that's an abundance problem, right? That's not a scarcity issue.
That's
So
right.
yeah, that's where I'm at on this. All right, last question as we bring this in for a landing, Amanda. Any books, podcasts, resources that you're like, hey, read this book, listen to this podcast, go to this conference, that you're like, hey, if you're wanting to grow, you're wanting to learn, get better personally, professionally, what do you recommend?
Um, I know folks give great recommendations of great books and great podcasts that are, leadership books, great business books. I'll tell you, this year I came back to the basics. I challenged myself that I wanted to read the Bible and truly study it.
Mhm.
I did it via a podcast. I'm not done. I'm not gonna meet my goal. It's gonna take me into next year, but I've been listening to Bible in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz. He's from Minnesota, fellow Minnesotan.
Yep.
And it's really helped challenge me to think of how I grow as a person, how I show up for my family, how I lead in my community, how I lead in work. And sometimes it's okay to go back to those basic principles of life, of our Creator, and leading intentionally with that always present in the back of our minds.
I love it. I love it. It's been for me too. I started on this journey about 3 years ago, finally finished the, cover to cover, read the whole thing for the first time in my life, right? Growing up as a Catholic
Mm-hmm.
kid in Minnesota, and now we're in the South, a little bit different church that we attend down here,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it's been one of the biggest shifts and changes for me is not only going to church and participating, but actually getting in the word. What I found, and this is the word intention was inspired by the study, because I can't think of a more intentional designer, and everything stems from that. So great answer. Everybody should get in there, pick a verse, and if nothing else, just soak in it and repeat it out loud and get to know it. So Amanda, this has been really cool. Thank you for being on the show. Good luck with everything as you guys continue to move forward with the organization, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Mark. It's been great to reconnect and just appreciate what you're doing here, just elevating the conversation for all of us to learn from. So great to see you again.
Yeah, thank you.